This video is designed for those who may not feel entirely comfortable playing as the black pieces in chess. In this video, I'll introduce you to a variation of the Sicilian opening that can provide a significant advantage. And that's not all, I have an intriguing chess puzzle in store for all of you. So make sure you stay tuned until the end for the full experience. To begin, we start with the common opening moves e4, c5, and knight f3. However, we deviate from the traditional path by playing e6, which allows us to create opportunities for our bishop and queen. Typically, our opponent responds by advancing their pawn to d4, which we promptly capture. The opponent then recaptures with their knight. The pivotal move in this line is bishop c5, which is relatively lesser known, but incredibly potent. Only a small percentage of players prefer this position. It's worth noting that bishop c5 is a formidable move, even against strong opponents with a high ELO rating. Some highly skilled players incorporate this opening into their repertoire. As the game progresses, your opponent often looks to improve their knight's position. However, when we advance to queen b6 at this stage, we begin to pose significant challenges for our adversary. Particularly in games against lower-rated opponents, they may even make critical mistakes. Your opponent may hesitate to defend with their bishop, fearing that the pawn on b2 is vulnerable. If they choose to retreat the knight instead, the pawn on f2 becomes exposed, potentially leading to a checkmate situation. Your opponent may indeed consider moving their other knight back to defend against the potential threats. However, we have a move in our arsenal that can create significant problems for them. As you can see, the pawn on f2 is vulnerable. After advancing with e5, your opponent may choose to move their knight to f5 to defend against the impending checkmate. This is where we make a critical move by pushing our pawn to f3. In this position, your opponent will face a dilemma. They will either lose their knight, or the game might conclude swiftly. It's evident that poor choices by your opponent can lead to trouble right from the start of the game. Now, let's analyze your opponent's move bishop to e3. In this scenario, your opponent might not realize that the b2 pawn is hanging. However, capturing the b2 pawn isn't the best choice. If your opponent proceeds with knight to b5, they aim to capture the bishop and potentially fork with knight to c7. When we capture the bishop on e3, there's a subtle move available for white. After the rook captures on b2, there are no squares left for the queen to escape. Nonetheless, the moves I'm about to demonstrate offer us a high likelihood of winning this position. In this situation, capturing the pawn on b2 directly isn't advisable. Instead, we advance our knight to square c6, increasing the pressure on our opponent. If the opponent opts to move their knight to a4, I'll demonstrate how to respond. However, let's first consider their alternative move, knight to c6. In this case, we proceed by capturing the opponent's bishop. After the opponent recaptures our bishop, we take the pawn with our queen, delivering a check to their king. Subsequently, we capture their knight. In this particular variant of the opening, our opponent loses the pawn. It's worth noting that a small misstep by our opponent can lead to difficulties for them in this opening. Now, let's revisit the scenario where the opponent plays knight a4. After knight a4, we respond by checking with our queen. The opponent will likely play c3 in this situation. Then, the sequence unfolds as follows. Bishop takes d4. Bishop takes d4. Knight takes d4. It's essential to note that the opponent cannot capture with the pawn, they must use the queen. Following this, we play e5, prompting the opponent's queen to move to c4. The queen has to defend the knight, setting the stage for our plan. Our next move is d6, which opens up our bishop and puts pressure on the opponent's queen. The opponent may respond with a check before we can carry out our plan. After the exchange of pieces, we don't simply play bishop to d7. Instead, we advance our king to e7. In this position, black holds a winning rate of 62%. We've covered the scenario where the opponent develops their knight. Now, let's analyze the variant where the opponent develops their bishop. If you're looking to enhance your chess skills, consider subscribing and liking this video. In the scenario where our opponent is considering playing the move e6, our strategy remains the same. We continue with our plan, playing queen to b6 to put pressure on the b2 pawn. If the opponent decides to develop their knight, we follow suit by developing our knight as well. This brings us into the position I previously explained. Now, let's analyze the variant where the opponent pushes their pawn to square b3. In response, we once again develop our knight and attack the opponent's piece with 3 of our own pieces, while they defend with only 2. If white plays c3, we bring our other knight into the game and set our sights on capturing the e4 pawn. When we examine this position closely, we can see that we have more pieces developed, even though white played the first move. In the case where white plays f3 to defend their pawn, there will be no piece left to protect the bishop on e3. This allows us to play e5, advancing our position. If our opponent makes a mistake and moves their knight to c2, they will lose a piece. The only move for the opponent in this situation is to capture the knight on c6. After the capture on c6, we take the opponent's bishop and gain an advantageous position. When our knight moves to f6, our opponent may respond with bishop to d3. Let's analyze this particular variant. We continue with knight takes d4. In response, our opponent takes our knight with their pawn. We retaliate by taking the opponent's pawn with our bishop, seeking vengeance for our previously lost bishop. Next, we attack the opponent's rook. If the opponent's knight moves to a3 to defend their rook, they will have to say goodbye to their knight after a well-timed before move. Alternatively, if the opponent places their knight on square d2, they will have to bid farewell to their bishop, as it becomes trapped. The essence of this Sicilian opening variant is to create tactical pressure on white, mainly by targeting the b2 pawn, to secure an early advantage for black. Now, it's time for a puzzle. In the given position, it's white's turn, and you need to find the best move for white. Share your answers in the comments, and let's see how many of you can solve it correctly. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with future videos. Take a moment to check out the other videos appearing on your screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care and peace.